Tonight on a KLFY special report, we look at the diverse lives of people in Acadiana, Louisiana, and the United States. Right now, a KLFY special presentation, honoring Black history, sharing our stories.
Hello Acadiana and good evening. I'm Danielle Johnson and this is Honoring Black History. Tonight we're going to hear stories from some of the most prominent African American leaders in the area. From the first African American to hit the airwaves as a DJ to St. Landry Parish's first Black interim sheriff. We'll also take a look at the Iberia African American Historical Society. But first, we begin right here in St. Martinville, where for years the African American Museum has traveled back in time, deepening visitors' understanding of Black history. The museum explains the rises and falls of African Americans, dating all the way back to their African roots. The tour introduces the visitors to who the Africans were before arriving in Louisiana. The museum chooses to focus on the West African Senegambian region, a mixture of Senegal, Ghana, and Mali.
Through records, we know that that's where the first Africans that arrived here are from.
Danielle Fontenette, museum guide, says different people from that region were from either the Wolof, Bambara, or Mandinga tribe. Men and women of these tribes were hard workers, rich in culture, goods and services, and spirituality.
It's amazing, Danielle, how people can tell what ethnic group you come from based on how you look.
Fontenette says slavery existed in Africa before the Europeans arrived. The transatlantic slave trade occurred after Europeans were given access to trade those slaves for war equipment. Fontenette says during the slave trade, enslaved Africans were viewed as cargo.
Slavery was a business. If my goal was to get to a port and be able to sell 200 slaves, right? But I could only fit 200 slaves on the ship, and I knew I was going to lose them, I overpacked that ship. So instead of just 200, I would carry 400.
After the 3 to 6 month journey, slaves were sold to work on plantations. Some worked in the field, while others managed the house, enduring years of mistreatment. Fontenette says although slavery is a major factor in Black history, African Americans also deserve to know who they were apart from slavery. Like Alexander Lamel, a successful free man of color who owned and sold several acres of land, or Charlotte, a free woman of color who owned her own property as well in 1748.
Women, no matter what race you were, it was against the law for you to own land, vote, have property, anything, right? But free women of color were owning property back in the 1700s. It's really important that we find a way to bring back pride to our people. So, and the way to do that is to show them who our people really were besides being a slave.
Eunice native Laura Balthazar was a pioneer in law enforcement, having paved the way for women in St. Landry Parish. But that's just one part of her incredible career that touched the lives of so many and is still impacting her beloved home. News 10 anchor Darla Montgomery looks back at the woman behind the badge and what made her so remarkable.
Laura Balthazar, former chief deputy and longtime St. Landry Parish law enforcer, passed away from complications related to COVID-19 February 5th of 2021 at the age of 69. But her legacy lives on in St. Landry Parish and beyond. Balthazar was revered as a remarkable woman who was always willing to help. She's described by many people as extraordinary, compassionate, and tenacious, a born leader with a heart of gold.
She was fearless.
Former Louisiana State Senator and former Opelousas Mayor Don Cravens knows the incredible legacy Balthazar left behind, having worked with her after she retired from law enforcement.
She was the only person who could fire an employee and they would walk out of the room and they were both smiling and laughing and almost hugging each other. She had that kind of personality, the ability to deal with people, but yet to keep their dignity from being compromised in the conversation. So, a phenomenal quality.
Craven says what he remembers most about her was her amazing ability to give and gain respect simultaneously from everyone she encountered in her community to the deputies under her command and the inmates housed in the parish jail.
She treated them with dignity and respect, and I can tell you, it was a mutual kind of relationship. No one felt intimidated. She was not intimidated by them, nor were they intimidated by her. It was more like almost like a mother who was tending to her kids and saying, you know, you've made mistakes, but hell, we're gonna try to fix this, and we'll try to make sure that you will get on the right path.
Balthazar was the first female African American to hold the posts of Chief Criminal Deputy and Chief Civil Deputy in the state of Louisiana. She oversaw detectives, the narcotics division, the jail, and just about everything in the department. She eventually decided to run for sheriff and lost that election by only 111 votes. It was her one regret in an amazing career that has left a lasting legacy.
She was also able to go in the trenches with folk. In other words, there's nothing that I'm going to ask you to do that I'm not willing to do myself. That was her philosophy, and that's what made her so great, and I think is what complements her legacy probably more than anything that I could think of.
Balthazar also served as CAO under Cravens and was most recently the director of the St. Landry Evangeline Sexual Assault Center. Coming up, we meet a native of New Iberia that is making it a point to celebrate the true and inclusive history of Iberia Parish. One New Iberia woman is spearheading a research group to uncover Black history in Iberia Parish. News 10's Raven Little introduces us to Dr. Phoebe Hayes and her team.
Thank you, Danielle. The Iberia African American Historical Society opened 6 years ago. Their mission? To piece together Black history in Iberia Parish.
If we're going to be honest, we have to tell the whole truth. And our organization has a tagline that says, celebrating the true and inclusive history of Iberia Parish.
Dr. Phoebe Hayes is the founder and president of the Iberia African American Historical Society.
I started doing research, and I found and counting 21 African American doctors associated with our parish, including 4 Black women beginning in 1897.
One of the women uncovered was Dr. Emma Wakefield. The New Iberia native was the first woman to practice medicine in Louisiana. Now, a monument in her honor and others line Main Street in New Iberia.
We want, when they pass down these streets, to be able to be reminded that there was a history of African Americans that we should all be proud of.
The research now has the attention of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. That partnership now is housing Dr. Hayes and her team.
My vision was more than just having an office, but we needed a space where the public could come and access records, documents that would teach the true history of this area.
Jordan Richardson is on Dr. Hayes' team. He is compiling an accessible digital catalog of every document and artifact the Research Society has found.
Family pictures, journals, charters. We are essentially photographing, scanning, and getting everyday objects that some people view as everyday objects, and contextualizing their historical importance.
Both Jordan Richardson and Dr. Hayes believe the Iberia African American Historical Society Center for Research and Learning has become a hub in the community. If you are interested in visiting the center, find more information on klfy.com. Raven Little, KLFY News 10.
The earliest documented evidence of Africans arriving in central Acadiana is around 1746, when European pioneer Andre Masse brought West Africans with him to work his settlement in the Attakapas district, the Middle Bayou Teche area. The Acadians didn't arrive until 1765, and the Spaniards arrived in 1779. Coming up, we hear the story of DJ Paul Tebow, the house rocker, and how he paved the way for Black on-air DJs in Acadiana. Welcome back, Acadiana. Music is a big part of the culture here in South Louisiana, and for a while, African Americans didn't have much representation on the airwaves. That's until Paul Tebow stepped on the scene. He dubbed himself the house rocker and quickly became a household name in Southwest Louisiana. News 10's Rodrika Taylor shares the story of Acadiana's first Black radio personality.
During the 1960s, radio personalities had vinyl records or cassette tapes. It was albums such as Buckwheat, Zydeco, and more. Legendary radio personality Paul Tebow used to provide a space for the Black community through radio.
There's not a Black person who grew up in this area who's over 60 years old for sure, probably younger than that, who wasn't touched, didn't experience Paul Tebow. That's a universal experience that we had.
Koto, Koto, Koto. Everyone remembers that.
He is the top of the food chain when it comes to radio here and the standard that he set.
Tebow worked in many locations, spreading his infectious voice and personality on the airwaves. He worked weekends at the once remembered radio station in the hub city, KVOL.
His persona changed, from being at home and when he was doing his commercials, his voice changed.
You could hear that joie de vivre over the airwaves.
He gave the Black community at ease. It was somebody that looked like them on the radio, sounded like them, playing their music.
While entertainment was not the only thing Tebow provided, it was the valuable information he shared connecting the Black community.
The show's importance, I don't think, can be duplicated today because there are too many outlets now. Paul was the only outlet.
If you wanted to know what was going to happen, you had to tune into Paul.
Another well-known part of Tebow was House Rocker Records. Over the years, it had moved to many places, once being on the corner of Washington and West Simcoe Street, then moving across the street, and today. This is the current location for the House Rocker Records. This business was a huge staple for many, inspired by Paul Tebow, better known as the House Rocker.
Before Spotify, before iTunes, we had House Rocker Record Shop. And it's important because the local musician doesn't always get into the big record shops.
The house rocker was making tremendous headway in Southwest Louisiana, but unfortunately, in 1983, he died from a massive heart attack.
It was horrible.
It was an important anchor for the community. It wouldn't have the meaning today that it did back then. It just wouldn't, because things were so limited. Just for that man to be on the radio was a big deal.
Yet still today, the legendary radio personality's legacy is forever remembered. In the words of Tebow, God bless you and I love you all. I'm Rodrika Taylor reporting for KLFY News 10.
Paul Tebow was posthumously inducted into the Louisiana Hall of Fame by Governor Edwin Edwards in 1992. The late author Ernest J. Gaines was recently honored by the United States Post Office with their latest named Black Heritage stamp. We get a look at it unveiling later on Honoring Black History. American author Ernest J. Gaines is honored for his legacy, contribution to literature, and for being a voice for African American experiences in the South. Earlier this year, the U.S. Postal Service held a ceremony unveiling Gaines as this year's Black Heritage stamp. News 10's Jasmine Dean has more on the 46th honoree.
The U.S. Postal Service honors Ernest J. Gaines as its 46th Black Heritage Stamp recipient.
Great that we're able to hold this ceremony here. This is our national ceremony. It's the first place where people will see this stamp.
Ernest J. Gaines was an African-American author known for some of his literary works, such as the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman and A Lesson Before Dying. David Walton with USPS says Gaines's contribution to literature is instrumental.
We're honoring Ernest Gaines on our 46th annual Black Heritage Stamp series. It's a big honor to be featured on a stamp, and we're just so privileged to be able to be featuring him. He's just such a instrumental voice in the African American community as far as literature.
As the 46th honoree for the USPS Postal Service Black Heritage Stamp Series, the first day of issue ceremony honored Gaines as the stamp became available to the public. Lena Foster, a student at UL, says it's an honor to hear about the things Gaines accomplished.
But actually coming to the event and hearing how he's also contributed to so many other great scholars, out-of-state scholars, it's just amazing to hear.
The Ernest J. Gaines Black Heritage Stamp is being issued as a forever stamp and will be equal in value to the current first-class mail 1-ounce price. Donald Moak, the governor of the U.S. Postal Service, was the official dedicator of the stamp and says the dedication was special.
So I think it's a very special moment, and it's great that this dedication was held right here within an hour of where Dr. Gaines grew up.
Gaines's contribution to literature and UL's campus will be forever stamped in the community. In Lafayette, Jasmine Dean, KLFY News 10.
Still ahead, we meet Jonas Richard, a North Lafayette native and alumnus of Como High School, and he's also a Hall of Famer at Shaw University. African Americans have made contributions to Acadiana since its inception in the fields of law enforcement, healthcare, media, politics, and athletics, which brings us to our next feature story. News 10 anchor Dalford Jones has the story.
On the north side of Lafayette, born and raised. On the basketball court is where he spent most of his days. Now, that story might sound familiar, but we aren't talking about the Fresh Prince. Our next story, the next person we want to focus on during this Black History Month is Jonas Richard.
The name Jonas Richard holds weight in basketball gyms throughout the Hub City, but the 5'8" guard got his start right here in the Macomb neighborhood at Hyman Park.
Little fella, just starting, getting into the gym. Older guys wouldn't let you play there, so I had to come over here.
And it was here, on this basket, where Richard would log countless hours on his way to becoming a neighborhood hero and a Como High School legend.
So what I did, man, come out here, tie my left hand behind my back, and go at it with my right hand. All day, layups, dribbling, probably go back and forth, up and down the court, but just working out, man.
His hard work paid off, not only with local honors, but afforded him the opportunity to play ball in college at Southern University and Tougaloo College. After his hoop dreams were fulfilled, Richard put his computer science degree to work.
Worked for IBM for about 9 years. At the same time, I was actually training. My daughter was playing. So, that got me involved into the women's game.
In 2010, he would get a shot at coaching the Lady Bears basketball team at Shaw University in North Carolina. The very next year, the team would win the NCAA Division II National Championship.
First time HBCU had won a Division II National Championship in about 30 years. So that was pretty historic.
And in October of 2022, Richard, along with the entire 2011-2012 championship team, were inducted into the Shaw University Hall of Fame.
Being recognized for, accomplishing something, not as an individual, but as a team, that meant a lot to me. I've always been team first. Like I said, I'm a point guard, so I got to be team first. Passing, getting everybody else involved, it was just amazing. And the thing I liked about coaching at...
So many amazing stories from right here in Acadiana. Thank you for joining News 10 as we honor Black history. If you would like to view any of the stories from this broadcast, head over to our website, klfy.com. Thanks for tuning in and have a good evening.